Welcome back to Learn Our Comms, Expand Your Thinking, episode 5. Welcome back, JFAnon Sapioplex, John and Paul. Thanks for being here yet again.
Glad to be here. This
Thank
is
you for
awesome.
having us.
Our audience has had so many questions. There's been a lot of conversations around some of the stuff that you guys have shared. Very interesting stuff. And I mean, I've had people call me and say, I haven't thought like this in a really long time. So thank you guys for doing that. I think it's really, really helping people to expand their thinking.
It's great.
So today, I did want to go through two different things. I wanted to go through questions that some people have for you guys, but then I think you guys want to go through some music.
That's today. Lyrics.
All right. So where do
The
you want
fun
to
stuff.
start? What was that?
It's the fun stuff. This is like the big kickoff of the Easter egg hunt.
I'm excited about it. I'm going to jump right in with a tough one. So it's not really a question. This is actually an interesting comment on the Rumble channel from episode 3, which was Yellow Submarine. A person by the name of Mini Trucks commented and said this. I want to get your reactions on this. And I haven't read this to them before, so they're hearing it for the first time. Had a dream about the Mickey Mouse hats the Blue Meanies wore. I told myself in dream to look into the board of Disney, so I did. Very interesting. The old board had a member with last name Pepper. Also, the entire board appears to have been replaced recently. This is a bigger story than just DeSantis arguing with Disney over taxes. What if the old board members are the real bloodlines of Deep State and they were all taken out? Would make sense that nobody really knows who they are and they stay out of the spotlight. I think the Disney connection and the BODs have a bigger role in all of this. Worth a closer look by someone who knows how to dig better than I do.
Wow. I had not looked at the Disney board. That is.
I hadn't looked at it in that detail, but I have one response that is not going to answer any questions. It's going to cause more.
Okay.
And my response is this: look into the founding of Disney and ask yourself if the reason Disney is there was to lure that board in and map all of their structures.
Interesting. See, and I want the audience to recognize this isn't just you guys digging. This is a collective digging effort, which is why it's so important to kind of take a look at the things that you guys are sharing and for everyone to kind of dig into it. It is an Easter egg hunt.
Yeah, that actually is really interesting. I mean, one of the things that underpins our theory is that there were a lot of stings done over a long period of time. And so certainly one could think, well, maybe Disney was set up that way. Maybe they were not only set up to lure in some of these big players that would be on boards, but all of the consumers of the filth, the stuff that's never talked about with Disney.
Exactly. So a couple of other questions. And this is a pretty easy one. How does yellow represent Q?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, John.
Oh, semaphore. Look up semaphore colors on any like maritime resource. You'll see the letter Q is represented by a yellow flag.
Yeah, solid yellow flag. Maritime semaphore flags have different patterns and colors, and the Q flag is just solid yellow.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is a theme throughout all this stuff. When you see yellow, like later we'll talk about Bullwinkle, and Bullwinkle's horns change from brown to yellow for no explicable reason, except that Teddy Roosevelt started the Bull Moose Party, and maybe Bullwinkle is the moose for that reason. So
many connections.
Yeah.
This one is not really a question, but almost kind of a question. So they asked about how this connects to time travel and Looking Glass, and what are your thoughts around those things?
You want to take that, John, or you want me to?
Well, my first thing is I don't think it's time travel. I think, though, that if you know your enemy's playbook and you know how things, once you gain control, you know how things are going to play out.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to look like time travel when you can make predictions.
Yeah,
Past like Q stuff.
Yeah, I always say that it's easy to predict the future when you control everything necessary to force the future, which is why I think we see the Simpsons cartoons predicting certain things, is because those things could already be forced by that time, so they were putting it into the media to cause this weird situation where people are saying, how come the Simpsons have been so accurate? Well, maybe it's because they had control of the Simpsons and they knew this stuff was going to happen. Um, I would I would just say to anybody who believes that time travel in any direction other than the rate that we're all moving forward is possible. First, you have to prove that that's possible. Then we can talk about it. I don't think it's possible.
One thing that I hear people bring up a lot is the Ingersoll Lockwood books about Baron Trump and all that stuff that were supposedly published around the turn of the century or in the late 1800s. Do we know those are really published then? I mean, how hard would that be to get into the Library of Congress if you wear the white hats? I mean, I don't know.
I thought about it that way.
It's easy, I think. So I don't know that those books were really published then. I don't think that they were, but I don't know. I mean, I could be totally wrong. So
Actually, I will say this. I believe I can't find evidence on all of them, but I did go back, and they can probably alter this too. I went back into newspapers.com and was able to look up when they talked about it. I think it was back in the 20s where they talked about Ingersoll Lockwood
Right.
publishing books.
That could be real, but the content that we see from the late 1890s could be fabricated. We just don't know. So
Yeah.
the question is, how much control do they have? If you think they have enough control to predict Baron Trump being Trump's kid, then what you also don't believe they have enough control to fake the history about those coming out at that time. It doesn't make sense.
Donald Trump really liked Ingersoll Lockwood and was like, I'm going to name my kid Baron.
Yeah, I think there's 1,000 confusion bombs that are just forcing people to say what's going on. That's the whole point, is we need everybody to say what's going on and then try to answer those questions.
Agreed. And so to add to that question, thoughts on Looking Glass then?
I would say, what is Looking Glass? There's a ton of information on all sorts of strange things online, and think about the cost of somebody making something like that up. It's like that much versus the impact of if something like that was real. You know what if somebody could look into the future, you know what they'd do? They would cheat at sports betting. They would cheat at the stock market. They'd become the richest person in the world, and then
You tell me Vegas doesn't already do that?
Yeah, I don't. It's in the same category for me as time travel. When somebody can prove that it's possible, I'll believe it. Otherwise, the truth is almost always mundane and boring.
So the story, I'm sure you've heard the story about the whistleblower who said he had seen Looking Glass, and that when they looked at Looking Glass, they couldn't change the outcome of the future, right?
Right. Well, let me give you an example. Okay. I saw Jesus yesterday. It took no effort for me to do that.
Yeah.
It's super cheap to do it. Anybody can do it. Anybody can be lying. So ask yourself what actually makes sense in reality. Of course, I didn't see Jesus yesterday.
Maybe you did.
So there.
Jesus comes in many forms.
Yeah.
maybe it was Jesus.
Maybe, yeah.
I
didn't say hey Zeus. I said hey Zeus. Someone asked if red balloon equals Easter egg.
I don't know. Red is symbolic of truth. Red pill, blue pill. That's why they're red and blue. Is like roses are symbolic of information that is true.
Are they talking about the song that came out in the 80s, 99 Luftballons?
No, but that's a good point. But
Yeah,
it was in the episode 3 Rumble, comments. Somebody asked, I guess, I don't remember there being a red balloon in Yellow Submarine. But...
Yeah, I don't know.
Paul McCartney conspiracy. I guess people wanted to hear more about that. Again, I mean, one thing I will say is a lot of people share my thoughts of, I didn't really know much about the Beatles. I love the Beatles now. And so I think a lot of people are starting to dig more into the Beatles and who they were and news stories and things that surrounding the Beatles. So I don't think that everyone knows that conspiracy. I don't know how much you guys are able to fill the audience in on that.
I don't know much about the Paul McCartney thing. There's a whole bunch of stuff about Paul McCartney dying and being replaced, and there's a lot of people claiming that Billy Shears is Paul McCartney. I think we covered that. At least I think that Billy Shears literally just means a resolute weapon. When you look up the meaning of the names, which, by the way, looking up the meaning of names, as soon as you start doing that, you find these people like for example, My Chemical Romance, Gerard Way is the lead singer. His name basically means the tip of the spear or the hard way. And I don't think that's an accident. That name was chosen because that's what he wanted to convey. So Billy Shears looks like just a resolute weapon. And in the song Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, they introduce him as, let me introduce to you Sgt. Pepper's. No, I'm sorry. Come to think of it, I can't remember the exact wording, but Billy Shears is Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. So that's kind of the hint that lets you know that it's a resolute weapon. It's not an individual.
Got it. Interesting. I got to go back and listen to that part again.
Yeah. So to address your question directly, the whole Paul McCartney thing might be just one of those confusion bombs to get people to dig deeper to figure out what's actually going on with the Beatles, because there is a ton going on with the Beatles.
Yep.
So.
Great.
And I'm John, and he's Paul.
Yes.
Somebody pointed that out. Like,
well, it's because we're apostles.
yeah, right. Disciples, really? Don't lump me in with those guys. They're way too good for me.
There were a lot of comments. I mean, not so much questions on episode 4. I know a lot of people had discussions around UFO technology and, scripture and all of those types of things. So maybe we have an episode that dives deeper into that, and Antarctica. That was a big discussion. So we may need to have like another part on those things.
Yeah, I think my analysis, I'm not sure how much John agrees, but my analysis is, like I said earlier, the truth is usually mundane and boring. And the pattern looks exactly, to me, like what you would expect if this was a huge military push to take out a crime syndicate that was worldwide. That is really mundane and boring, and it's not what people want to hear. Sorry, I'm a detective.
Good. Sorry.
I would say two things about all your base is this is all on me. There were 2 images that we didn't show, that we didn't address, and I had all these images saved in a folder, all numbered sequentially. And when I zipped it and sent it to Kaidi, I don't know where those 2 went, but the number sequence, it's a file name. You'd have to actually manually do it. So these 2 were removed. There was one that was a cornflakes box with Han and Jabba. And another was a Cessna, or a small plane pulling a banner. If you look at the plane one is easy because if you look at the size of that plane and the proximity to the banner, there's no way that plane was that close, and there's no way that it would be able to pull a banner that big. Just the surface tension and the friction on that banner, that plane would not be big enough. So the plane was inserted. The plane appears to be red and white. And if you know anything about someone who died in July of 1999, piloting a plane to Martha's Vineyard,
JFK Jr.
Yeah, that was the livery. So I don't know if it's saying anything about JFK Jr., but I know that that plane was put there for a reason. It wasn't in the original. Han and Jabba. So this one is a little harder to find. The original cereal box was sold in Canada, only in Canada. So that was only available there. There were 2 different weights. I know that some people have said, well, that one's 454 grams and the one in the picture is something else, 525. There were 2 different weights. I was able to find that. But anyway, I'm not sure exactly what it is. On the back of that cereal box, though, there was one of those like mind's eye pictures. And if you see it, what it ends up being, it's Darth Vader like staring at his fist. So the Empire is frustrated.
That's all I have in terms of questions. A lot of them were redundant. Do you guys have any that you saw, that you answered, that you thought might be important for other people to see?
The cows. So there's
the cows
on True Social. At Bushcraft Family pointed this one out, and it was awesome because
love Bushcraft.
Yeah, they're great.
We had no idea.
No, we had 0. And vaca, the word vaccine comes from the Latin vacca, that has to be why it's in there. That it's referencing vaccines, possibly bioweapons. But
Vaca in Latin means cow.
Yeah.
So I think the good guys were telling the bad guys, we know what you're doing with vaccines.
Yeah. I have a question about that, and this is my own thinking from all of this. Do you think, in terms of the ones that were released in 2020, the good guys would have gotten hold of a lot of those to put saline in it or make sure that people weren't injured by this? Is that even a possibility?
Yeah,
yeah,
but we can't know all the details. Obviously, people have had problems with it. The flu totally disappeared. So that's any COVID numbers that are based on what would have been flu numbers don't count. Those are just removed because they would have been flu. But the rest of it, yeah, there's horrific stuff going on there. We don't know how much they were able to diminish the effects of it. It's sort of like 9/11. Why do you sit there and watch it happen? Well, you have to let the bad guys carry it out to get them all. Now, were they able to replace them? Were they able to nerf it somehow? We don't know.
No, I do remember, or I do note that those vials had to be kept very, very cold, like -37 or something like that. So it's possible. I know that I think it's called Find My Batch or something like that,
Yes.
.com or one of those things where you can put a batch number in and see. And there were some batches that were way worse, and some states got it way worse. I live in Minnesota. As blue as this state was, it got some of the worst batches. I don't know. So I think it's I if I had to speculate, I would say that the good guys did what they could to try to mitigate the vaccines, but obviously didn't get all of it.
Yeah,
Tragic.
it is. It absolutely is. All right. So do you guys want to get into some music?
Yeah, we have a lot of stuff to go through. So I think, John, we should probably try to minimize the dialogue on it because there's so many different points. And I think that our object, and correct me if I'm misstating anything, John, is to get everybody to look for yourselves, because we threw together this list because we're probably forgetting half of the stuff that we've already seen, but this is still a huge list, and it's all across all different genres and time frames. And what we're trying to point out here is there's stuff in songs that doesn't make sense unless you look at it through this lens. So you can take any one of these things individually and say, oh, these guys are crazy. The problem is the pattern. The pattern is unmistakable when you go through all these things. And then when you start looking at other things, pick your favorite song from when you were a kid. There's a decent chance that it's got all sorts of stuff in it that you had no idea was there. So,
Agreed.
Yeah. I mean, keep in mind, too, that so much of this stuff, we're going to throw it out there, and it may seem really tenuous to you, because maybe it is, but there's no way that all of this is tenuous. There's no way that this is all, like Paul said, there's no way this is all by chance.
I wanted to add before we get into Black Parade that there is a Substack that Mr. Sapioplex over here wrote. If you guys go to sapioplex.substack.com, you can see here, welcome to the Black Parade, Hidden Communications. There's a whole Substack for you guys to look at and share along with this.
Let me before I get into that, let me mention a series of movies, just because this is not songs, and we want to kind of barf it out first, just to set the theme. Everybody's familiar with The Matrix, right? One of the most popular movies of all time. And if you don't think The Matrix is a set of messaging to wake people up, then I'm not sure what to tell you other than watch it a few more times and then compare it with what's going on today with people waking up about corruption. There's a movie called They Live. I think it was from the late 80s. That is just a complete overlay of this whole theme.
Oh, They Live. Yes.
They Live. You take off the glasses and you can't see it. You put on the glasses and you can see everything's different than you thought it was. Well, that is a complete allegory or metaphor for what's been going on. Eyes Wide Shut.
Definitely.
Definitely filled with screwy, cult stuff. But most people don't know that was filmed, I believe, in 1998 at a Rothschild estate. There is no way the Rothschild family would allow that unless two things happen. One is they didn't own the estate. Why would that happen? Since when do the Rothschilds not own everything?
Yeah.
And the second reason is if the Rothschilds weren't actually bad guys. And I know as soon as people hear that, they're going to go, oh,
They're going to give us the Heisman. They're going to, no way. Well,
I don't know if they're good or bad. I don't. And people need to
maybe
start
it was
expanding.
taken from them.
Or maybe in the early 1900s, they flipped secretly and have been acting bad. We can't tell. That's the pattern of the good guys. The good guys are acting bad. V for Vendetta, if you haven't seen that, that's where the popularization of the Guy Fawkes mask comes in. And I'll just point out that November 5th is a big date in that. Remember the 5th of November. So every November 5th, we watch that movie. Forrest Gump has a
life is like a box of chocolates.
Right. Forrest Gump has a ton of stuff in it, and rather than enumerate that, like we could do a whole episode on Forrest Gump, but please don't make us do that. No. There's a scene where he's in the White House where he drinks 15 Dr. Peppers, and there's 2 sitting on the table. Well, that's 17, and we're talking about Dr. Pepper, so Pepperland and Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Coincidence? Nah, it probably isn't.
I gotta pee. I mean, yeah. He has to pee. Pee?
And he's in the White House.
I mean, what? Because I was a gazillionaire, I took grass for free.
So, and then, we just did the last episode, or the second to last episode on Yellow Submarine, which that is good luck. And the last one I want to point out is, oh, go ahead.
I said the script for The Great Awakening.
Yeah, basically. Although I think there's multiple scripts. They Live is a script through a slightly different lens. And so The Matrix is a script through a different lens. So how many of these movies are there? Are there 100? We don't know. We haven't looked. So but the last movie I'll point out is Dr. Strangelove. And that is full of stuff. That was done in 1964 by Stanley Kubrick. Little details. He started 3 production companies. They're all named after birds of prey. That's kind of odd. They're in Britain, which is also kind of odd when you're a U.S. filmmaker making movies with a production studio in Britain. But there's a scene in Dr. Strangelove that's very memorable where the general enumerates all these things about body fluids and commies. And it's very awkward and it's comedy gold, right? But listen to that scene and ask yourself why everything the general says is true.
That's exactly the point. So the general's name is Jack D. Ripper. So here's one of those quotes. And this one, I mean, it's in the movie. And Ripper is this crazy, outlandish character. And so when people saw it, they're like, oh yeah, he's nuts. But if you listen to his words, believe his words. And this is the quote. He's talking to a guy, Mandrake. Mandrake, do you recall what Clemenza once said about war? He said war was too important to be left to the generals. When he said that 50 years ago, he might have been right, but today war is too important to be left to politicians. I can no longer sit back and allow communist infiltration, communist indoctrination, communist subversion, and the international communist conspiracy to sap and impurify all of our precious bodily fluids. And then there's a whole other scene with bodily fluids. Watch the movie. Watch the movie.
The thing about the body fluids is you can read that or listen to those words, and he's talking about medicine. He's talking about big pharma putting things into your body and to corrupt your bodily fluids. The vaccine, they're injecting shit into your veins. That is corrupting your body fluids. So what he's saying is actually correct. So this stuff is buried everywhere. So anyway, let's leave the movies behind him before we get into
an interesting point I wanted to add to what you just said, because it jogged my memory, is the old George magazines, I used to read them cover to cover. Politics is too important to be left to politicians is one of the lines that JFK Jr. used to sign off his editor's letter with. So
wow.
Yeah.
Wow. There you go. So John, you want to go over cartoons before we hit the songs?
Yeah, let's do that.
So I want to point out having to do with Little Green Men. So I believe that Little Green Men is the big pun that started all the alien stuff. Has to do with Osiris because Osiris is always green. So I think that's the good guys making fun of the bad guys by calling them Little Green Men. little being, weak or inconsequential. If you look at Marvin the Martian, put out by Looney Tunes. By the way, Looney Tunes was created in 1931, right around similar timing when a bunch of PSYOP stuff was being formed. So was Looney Tunes part of this PSYOP? That sounds insane. I know that sounds insane. However, there's a lot of messaging in Looney Tunes cartoons about this stuff. One of them is Marvin the Martian. He's wearing a tutu. His face is completely nondescript black, almost like, a hidden enemy, right? He's wearing essentially kind of a Roman or a Spartan helmet, and he is a little dork. Everything he does fails. He gets very, very angry about being disintegrated. Now, if you were the good guys and you were removing the bad guys from the military, for example, integration is when you combine things, but when you take them apart, you disintegrate them. And so I think that's actually, it's the good guys making fun of the bad guys, and they get very angry when they're disintegrated.
I love that.
The whole cartoon itself is just a complete piss take on the bad guys because you listen to Marvin's voice and he that really makes me angry.
Yeah.
You've taken my regulator.
That's good.
My UB36 space demodulator.
Wouldn't it be awesome if, like, at the end of this very long movie, we got the Looney Tunes? That's all, folks.
I think a lot of this stuff is comic relief because when people start finding it, it's all absurd.
Yeah.
But it's telling you what's going on, but it's all kind of Monty Python-esque comedy. I mean, it's the best comedy out there. So one that's very similar to Marvin the Martian is the Great Gazoo in the Flintstones. Same narrative. Look up some of this. It's just a comic relief character. You can say, oh, so what? But if you're the good guys and your goal is to control the media, which is exactly what appears to have happened, you'd be making fun of the bad guys all over it just to demoralize them. So,
do you think these people that are involved in these shows, like Looney Tunes or The Simpsons, are aware of any of this stuff, or are they just told what to put out?
We don't know. We don't know.
It's worth digging into.
Yeah, I mean, there's for example, there's Task Force Orange, which is in the military, and it specializes in human exploitation. So imagine weaponized salesmen who can convince you to do something and you think it's your idea. So who knows what's actually going on? Are they enlisted men doing this? Are they, it could also be cooperating rich people, I call angels, who are in communication with the military and things the military can't or doesn't want to or is better for them not to do. Then the angels just say, got it, and they make it happen. It does appear to be a combined effort between military and rich people. So.
I think to your question too is we got a few more cartoons to go through, but when we get into the lyrics, now it doesn't mean that every one of these artists that we're quoting, that we quote lyrics, doesn't mean that those guys are good guys. I can envision scenarios where maybe some of them are, but I can also envision some of these guys, they don't know any better. Somebody else is writing all their songs for them, and they hand them a sheet of songs and go, look, you take these songs, record them. We know they're good. You can put your name on them. You get the royalties.
That's actually very common with pop stars is they don't write their own songs. They go into the studio and practice a song, and then they sing it, but it's already written for them. All the music's done, and they sing it, and their producer's saying, don't worry, this is going to be a #1 hit.
And on the opposite side, though, there are bad people putting out music, too, that are trying to distort messaging to people. Frequency is another thing that comes into this, right? They're putting out songs that have certain frequencies that make people crazy or not good things.
People say that. I'm not so sure that's true, but people say that.
Well, I also grew up being told that. So maybe
I try to put everything in the I don't know category until I see some really compelling evidence that says, yeah, okay, that's probably true. And with the frequency stuff, the reason I don't necessarily buy into that is because everybody's cochlea is a slightly different size. And so that gives your frequency response is different from person to person. But anyway, the next cartoon I want to mention is Scooby-Doo. And the reason I want to mention this, it has nothing to do with making fun of people, but it's teaching the population that every crime, every time there's something that you don't know about and it looks spooky like ghosts or something supernatural, you pull off the mask and it turns out it's just some guy doing insurance fraud, and he says, damn those pesky kids, right? Because the truth is always boring and mundane. And that's what Scooby-Doo tells you. If you wanted to teach a future generation of kids that everything always boils down to who's behind the mask, then you do Scooby-Doo. Would the bad guys do that? I don't think so.
No.
So
No, the bad guys introduced Scrappy-Doo, which ruined the whole.
exactly.
I mean,
Oh my God.
Scooby's awesome. I grew up on Saturday Morning Scooby, the
Yeah.
original.
Yeah.
Reggie, roll face.
Okay, so the last one is Bullwinkle. I'm totally convinced Bullwinkle was done by the PsyOps guys. The humor level is off the charts intelligent. And for example, Bullwinkle's horns initially started off brown, and then they changed to yellow for no good reason.
I didn't know.
Rocky, the flying squirrel, is wearing an aviator hat that's slightly blue, which is symbolic of lies. They're making fun of bad guys through the whole thing. And also, the reason the moose reference is relevant is because Teddy Roosevelt started the Bull Moose Party, and you'll actually see moose references through tons of stuff where it just, like, why is that there? For example, all your base belong to us. There's a sign that says 193 collisions, which, by the way, somebody pointed out online that 193 is the legal code for punishment for manslaughter, I believe.
That would make sense.
And so when you mix that with moose from the Bull Moose Party, i.e. what Teddy Roosevelt started, then that's the good guys telling the bad guys, look, you're killing people and you're going to go down for it. Another funny moose reference is the credits in Monty Python and the Holy Grail. It starts off with this bizarre Scandinavian language talking about moose, and they've inserted all these moose things in the credits. That's funny, and it's good comedy. So you could say, oh, well, that's just a moose reference. Is it? What if it's not? What if they're dropping this angel poop everywhere? And that's what it looks like to us. Because when you go through this stuff, you just start seeing it everywhere. My Chemical Romance next?
Yeah.
So I did a write-up on this on Substack, and just a 10-second backstory. This is so huge, I basically punted because it would have killed me to try to analyze the whole thing and write it up. I could have written a book. So I punted and said, look, here's the Black Parade, this song. And it's so obvious what's going on once you see it that I'm just going to leave it up to everybody else. If you want to go through the rest of the lyrics, there's a ton of My Chemical Romance songs. The Black Parade, the band was started the day after 9/11. The main singer, his name is Gerard Way, which basically means tip of the spear, depending on how you read it. But you'll see that the song, The Black Parade, Welcome to the Black Parade, actually, is the official name of the song. It's telling you what's going to happen with the whole PSYOP and the COVID narrative. And this was put out in 2006. So we're going to play the first segment of it, and I'm going to explain one of the pieces of lyrics, which if you want to know more, just read my Substack or just watch, read the lyrics and watch the video and look at the messaging that's in the video. What are they trying to tell you that's not in the lyrics? This is supposed to be about a guy with cancer. And I just look at the lyrics and say, no, it's not. So, and then we're going to play a part with the doctors where you'll see it, and I'll explain it from there. So go ahead.
When I was a young boy, my father took me into the city to see a marching band. He said, son, when you grow up, would you be the savior of the broken, the beaten, and the damned?
All right, pause it. Okay, so when I was a young boy, my father took me into the city to see a marching band. It sounds like a guy is describing a story about a marching band. The military is a band of people who march. This song is talking about the military. And then it says, when you grow up, would you be the savior of mankind, essentially? That's really pointed if you look at it through this lens. Now, we're not going to go through the rest of the lyrics. We're going to jump forward to a point in the song where there's this guy who is allegedly dying of cancer. But I think this guy is the people hurt by COVID and the sheep who don't understand what's going on. He's allegedly a guy with cancer, but you'll see it's something else. I think I paused it. Okay, so did you notice the TV blowout? The television is blowing out, right? That's all the information is just flying out of the media, right? And then you've got the situation where this alleged cancer patient, which I don't think is a cancer patient, I think that represents the population that's being hurt by big pharma. He's sitting in the hospital bed, and then the walls to the hospital room fall down, and all the nurses and doctors are trying to shield themselves from what? From the Black Parade, the PSYOP. The Black Parade is the PSYOP. The black symbolizes ignorance or things you can't understand because you don't know. And it's all hidden. It's a PSYOP, right? So the Black Parade is the PSYOP. If you look at the uniforms that the band is wearing, they're all military marching band uniforms. Okay, this goes on and on and on, and I explain a bunch of it in the Substack, and I'm not going to go explain tons of it because I want everybody to look at it for themselves. You can see it, but in this video, there's so much symbolism that is screaming about what's going on. It's almost impossible to ignore. This is an operation. This was really deliberate, and there's maybe 20 or 30 other chemical romance songs that have this content in it that's different than most of the other content that we're going to be talking about, in that it appears to be the angels, the good guy rich people, talking to the bad guy Satanist rich people about how they're going to just be worse than them and they're all going to get killed off. It's very strange, but it isn't the military talking, it's the angels. So it's different than some of the other songs we're going to go over. But anyway, that's I'll leave it there. There's a whole mess there. So much that I just said I'm not writing this whole thing up.
Just to add to this, and I could be wrong, but not just are these, like, it's not just nurses. Could that be the American Red Cross? Because I think they were publicly outed when the Hawaii thing happened.
Could be, although I will warn you that they were started by the Rothschilds. They were controlled by the Rothschilds, and the Rothschilds could be good guys acting like bad guys. And to underscore that, I will say that Kim Jong-un in North Korea has a phone line, a red phone that goes down to the president of South Korea. And that wire is just a hard line. There's no phone network or anything. It's a hard line. And guess who guards that line? The Red Cross. So the Rothschilds are the organization that would be able to tap that line.
That's odd.
That's very, very strange.
Yeah. Very strange. I didn't even know that.
Paul, I would say one other thing about My Chemical Romance. Didn't they have a drawing of a band leader on that album?
Yeah. And in fact, Katie later looked this up and stick in an image of it. This is the leader of the Black Parade. And actually, if you look at the album art, this goes on and on. There's even more and more symbolism, right? But this band leader is a skeleton who's leading the band. He's got his big staff. Guess what the band nicknamed this character?
Oh, I know this one. I'm not going to say
it. Pepe. You know, throw up a picture of Pepe the Frog, too, for all the Q-tards out there. We love the Q-tards.
We are
Q-tard.
People who are trying to find out the truth is what they are. But, yeah, they what are the odds that all this messaging is here and they named that character Pepe?
Yeah, there's how many coincidences until it's mathematically impossible?
Yeah.
Yep.
Maybe that's easier. Okay.
Yeah, why? Stop. You go back to that. Starved in a land of plenty. That awful character you saw with the dress is called Mother War. She's flanked by these two girls here that are fear and regret. The symbolism is really, really deep. There's a lot of Rosicrucian symbolism. The band is named after the chemical romance of Christian Rosencrantz, who is believed to be the originator of the Rosicrucians in France. There it is. Starved to death in a land of plenty. So essentially, they're telling you what's going on. They're telling you what the problem is. They're showing you that there's this black operation going on that's confusing. And you see the guy in the hospital smock walking around dazed, like he's a normie looking at what's actually going on for the first time in his life. You know, isn't that a coincidence? So
I feel like we're going to say that a lot.
And notice, by the way, how the float that the band is on is now ringed in red roses, red flowers. Truth.
Yeah, red is truth. There's so much symbolism, like fear and regret give him a kiss and walk away after he gets a medal. He's being given the gift of knowledge about what's going on, and all the fear and regret leaves him. All you have to do is look these songs up, look up the lyrics, read the lyrics, watch the videos, because sometimes it takes a combination of two. And so what we'll do is go through these and note what we found really quickly, but just like get a pencil and piece of paper and write these down. And go back to them or pause the video and look each one up, because we've picked out some of the most obvious stuff, but there's a ton of songs out there that have these themes in them, but they're not as strong as these that we're going to be pointing out. Some of them are stronger, some of them are weaker. And what they all have in common is the lyrics are very strange and cryptic, and it's not really how you'd write a song.
Yeah, and we can send Kaidi, we can send you a list. You can put it in the description or something like that. So it's just a list of all the ones that we're talking about. And keep in mind too, again, these we're just going to be touching on a couple things in some of these songs. There's a lot more there. One thing that I think has helped me try to find this stuff. So you go back and find some of the most popular songs. First of all, if you have a group like Black Sabbath, who we're going to talk about, go back to their really popular stuff and you start to read through it. And those are the bands, the ones that got really popular and had a lot of radio play.
Yep.
Well, those are one hell of a platform.
The most popular songs tend to have the most angel poop in them, and it's the most direct.
I don't even think you need to go looking for it, because even yesterday on my drive to work, I'm randomly playing Spotify. I just let it go. And the songs that I would normally listen to, I was like, mother effer. I could literally tell, like, that's angel poop right there.
Yep.
And I wasn't looking for it. I was just listening to songs.
Once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Yeah.
So Ylvis, for those of you who maybe haven't heard the name before, it looks like Elvis, but with a Y in the front. A Norwegian duo, maybe a trio, depending on which bio you're reading. Very, very interesting band. Their music runs the gamut. They do every genre, and they do them all really, really well. They've got,
I would say not really well. They do it perfectly. Yeah.
And I'm not a musician. Ball, you're a drummer. You know more about the composition kind of stuff. But
I play a bunch of instruments.
These guys are incredible, and a lot of their songs are just plain funny. There's a song that they have. You should all listen to it. I'm not going to say the full word, but it's You're Effed. Look it up. It's actually not effed in the title, so you know where to go. So one of the songs is called Trucker's Hitch. Now the lyrics are just about a knot, tying a certain knot. But the picture that's there appears at the 117 mark, 116, 117.
117. What are the odds?
What are the odds now? What color is that boat? Oh,
Tiffany blue.
Tiffany blue.
Odd.
Love that color.
Oh, and there's a Q.
It happens to have a Q on it.
Really interesting.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
weird. Could that mean something else?
Well,
They're
Tiffany
like
blue.
some kind of boating symbol I don't know about.
Probably a coincidence.
Yeah, blue is
Probably.
symbolic of lies. Tiffany, the word Tiffany means like a thin gauze or a thin fabric. So Tiffany blue literally translates in the esoteric symbolism into a thinly veiled lie.
Now we know that also is the color that it was highly associated with Jackie Kennedy for sure.
Oh, big time. Well, Trump also named his daughter Tiffany because of the Tiffany.
Well, and Melania was giving Tiffany blue presents to Michelle Obama.
Big Mike. Yep.
Big Mike.
Which is also the box that the ashes, Junior's ashes were put into.
Yeah, that would be a
So we've
thinly
been
veiled
told.
lie, would it not?
Yeah.
So we've been told. You guys probably know the song "What Does the Fox Say?" I mean, the lyrics. It's
absurd.
It's such an absurd song, and the video is even better.
Well, that's the other thing about that song. There is no way in a real world where that song would have gotten as popular as it did.
It's got something like
Who the hell's
1.6
listening to that?
billion views.
Yeah.
Billion
with a B.
1,600 million views. And that song is absolutely absurd. I mean, it has the line "fish go blub" in it, and it's a popular song. So what I find interesting about that song is it has lyrics in it that talk about how the fox's fur is so red, so beautiful, almost like an angel in disguise. Okay, red symbolizes the truth, and it's an angel in disguise. Okay. And then you go down and they make a joke about Morse code. They say, if you find a friendly horse, would you communicate with it in Morse?
Yeah.
And they say, how would you communicate with the horse? Well, that's 5 beats each, which is 5/5. What are the odds that there's a 5/5 joke about Morse code in a pop song that is absurd? You're looking at an intelligence group that made that song.
Yeah.
Wow.
So let's just go on from there. That people can scratch their heads on that one all day long.
You know what? As long as you're there, listen to the song and read the lyrics for Massachusetts by Yildiz.
Yep.
That's freaking hilarious.
Well, and also with that song, when you're listening to it, think Disney Lion King production value. When I said they're perfect, I'm not kidding. They do every genre perfectly. All of the transitions to the different genres are perfect, as if they have a multi-billion-dollar corporation behind them with production value. And these are, we are supposed to believe this is a couple guys from what is it, Norway?
Norway.
And by the way, they all speak multiple languages and they're funny as hell. The odds of this not being a psyop just approaches zero.
I made a post on Truth about this, about the background of these two guys and their father, who was in what country was he in now? Somewhere in Africa. Now I can't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, it was African. I can't remember.
He was working for a company called NORAD. It was like the Norwegian Development Company, but it's known as NORAD. And
Right.
And he spent time in these war-torn countries. And those two boys in Yildiz, they were young and they were with him. Is that with a company?
war-torn country working for a company called NORAD?
Yeah, not a place I'd
It's
take my
like-
children.
How do you make up this sheep dip crap? Also, they also had a show in Norway called O-Fag, which in Norwegian fag actually means something. But I think it's the U.S.
OFAG.
intelligence. Yeah.
OFAG is an orienteering course or something like that, right? And there's a literal picture of them, and it says OFAG, which
Yeah,
you guys know the cue boards.
these guys are hilarious. So
Yeah.
anyway, okay. Next, let's go to the Green Manalishi by Judas Priest. I heard this song when I was a teenager, when I was a kid, and it always confused me because the lyrics say the green Manalishi with a 2-pronged crown, which is very, very deliberate, but very weird. Like, what the heck does that mean? Is it a frog? Is it okay? Osiris. Look up photos of Osiris, or not even photos, but drawings. Egyptian drawings. Osiris is always green, i.e., Satanist, and the headdress it has appears to have these 2-pronged things on it. That song was originally written by Fleetwood Mac And you can find Fleetwood Mac versions of it. It's basically the same song, but it was popularized by Judas Priest. So what that song is talking about is the cult. It's talking about the Satanist cult. Why is that song there? The cult wouldn't put that there.
Yeah.
They wouldn't do that. They're not going to disclose anything they do about their methods. So the good guys were putting that there to popularize the knowledge of the cult so that we could get to this point where everybody knows about all of the Satanism. The only reason we know about it is because the good guys seeded the media landscape for our entire lives. Go to the next one.
Next one is Bob Dylan, Masters of War. I heard this in 6th grade, and I loved it. I'm a Bob Dylan fan. I like the guy's voice. I confess. But his lyrics are really the bomb. And in this particular song, I mean, you guys can read it, and it doesn't necessarily sound like it's a whole lot of cryptic stuff, but it's a true protest song. And the reason why we thought of this one is because later we're going to touch on War Pigs by Black Sabbath, which is a lot of the similar stuff, similar theme. But it's about you masters of war, you that build the big guns. Basically, you put a gun in my hand and you hide from my eyes, and you turn and run farther when the fast bullets fly. That's worth just a look up and a read through. It's a great song.
It'll blow your mind. It was also recorded in 1963, which is pretty early. So that's the same year Kennedy was killed in, and his ashes were put in a Tiffany blue box. Go ahead and do the Doors, John.
Next song, Doors. The Doors have a lot of different songs, and the Doors could probably be their own episode, given the fact that they were heavily involved in the Laurel Canyon thing. Jim Morrison couldn't read music, yet somehow he comes out this ready-made rock god. Oh, and he's the son of an admiral who was involved in the Gulf of Tonkin. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, the lyrics. So listen to the end, the lyrics of the end. This is the end, beautiful friend. This is the end, my only friend. The end of all of our elaborate plans. The end of everything that stands. The end. No safety or surprise. The end. I'll never look into your eyes again. What I read, and the lyrics continue like this. What I read is that these are like the good people in these bloodlines, in these bad bloodlines, and they're basically looking around and saying, "Look, you guys have totally fucked this up. This is the end. You're gonna die. I'm gonna die." The song goes on. Can you picture what will be so limitless and free, desperately in need of some stranger's hand in a desperate land? So I take that not necessarily that they're all going to die, but that they're going to give up what they had. They're going to give up the riches, the wealth, or whatever it is, and now they're going to be in need of a stranger's hand. Lost in a Roman wilderness of pain, and all the children are insane. Roman Catholic Church.
Yep.
You know, I mean, is all of the stuff that we know that, or we suspect, let's say, certainly all of the pedophile priests. Mm-hmm. Further on the song, it references Ride the Snake. He's long, he's 7 miles, he's old, and his skin is cold. That's the cabal. If you guys remember I Pet Goat, you remember Draco. Dude had lizard skin, all the money, everything else.
Trump always tells the story about the snake.
He does tell a story about the snake. Yeah, that's right. That's right. There's the whole spoken line. The killer awoke before dawn. He put his boots on. He took a face from the ancient gallery and he walked on down the hall. Basically, he murdered his family. But I think if you take it from a cabal point of view, a good guy in the cabal, that they're going to help take these guys out. So anyway, there's more to the song. Read it. The Doors are really, really interesting.
Yeah, the detail I wanted to point out about the Doors was that Jim Morrison showed up in Laurel Canyon with a whole bunch of songs already written. Mm-hmm. So we were talking about how did they produce these songs? Well, he's the son of an admiral who was involved in the Gulf of Tonkin. I mean, it sounds like the PSYOPs guys said, this kid's trusted. He's going to go and be a rock star here. Here's a whole pile of songs we wrote for you.
Yeah.
So
I'm going to jump in there. The Doors, you bring that up, and this is funny because, again, I was listening to random music, but one of them happened to be from my favorite movie of all time, and I posted this on Telegram. Nobody judged me. Was The Lost Boys, and
I love The Lost Boys.
It's my favorite movie of all time. Of all the movies,
people are strange.
Yes,
I love that.
Doors. But if you look at that soundtrack from The Lost Boys, amazing. But there's some songs in there that I think have some angel poop in it. And I didn't recognize that until just yesterday when I was listening to the soundtrack. I was like, hey, wait a minute. This makes some sense.
Yeah, some
I'm
of these
gonna have to go back and listen to that now.
Yeah.
Yeah, some of these songs I've listened to thousands of times. Like when I was a kid, I'm a guitarist, and I grew up on Eddie Van Halen, and now I can't play anything that doesn't sound like Eddie Van Halen. But I can only understand the lyrics now, and I've heard these songs over and over and over and over again, and now I go, oh my God, I was listening to that my whole life, and I never even realized it was there.
Yeah.
So,
Listen to when you have a chance, John. I Still Believe is one of them. It's like the lyrics are. I mean, the song itself, the music is great. The lyrics are stupid. The fact that because it doesn't go into this big thing, but it's very straightforward. So just
Yeah.
listen to that one when you have a chance.
Yeah, I will. I love The Lost Boys. That was such a great movie. It's cult classic kind of movie.
Mm-hmm.
All right, moving on. Devo. I posted something about this on True Social. There's songs called Patterns. Gotta look this one up. This is cool. Patterns all around you, patterns everywhere, patterns of behavior sometimes seem unfair. Can you recognize the patterns that you find? Patterns unfamiliar, patterns lead you through to patterns of discovery, tracing out the clues. Can you recognize the patterns you find stuck in your mind? I mean, the song is just amazing.
this is exactly what we are doing.
Yeah.
What are the odds that they write a song about exactly what's happening? Anyway.
Can you imagine being them, by the way? And I'm sorry I keep cutting you off, but imagine being them, by the way. They're like, finally, these people are getting it. We've had this stuff out forever.
If we're right, yeah.
Yeah, this was deliberately designed to pop like this, I think, and we are the needle that is popping it.
I haven't gotten my cookie yet. NSA, do you hear that? The one line from this song, though, is interesting, and this is the one I quoted on Truth. In this land where stability is hard to find, you can rearrange the patterns so unkind. Don't bother asking why a pattern never cries. Old patterns never die, they just go on and on. But don't bother asking why a pattern never cries. So that means, to me, what I read is, you see this pattern, and it looks like Rothschilds are bad. A pattern is it's logic. Logic is indifferent to emotion. That's kind of how I'm seeing it. There is no emotion involved with this. It is or it isn't.
Yeah, I would just point out with all of these things, patterns is a particularly good one. It appears to be an educational tool to teach people to think. And I think this is the difference between non-enlightened thinking and enlightened thinking, is where you're using your brain to the fullest capacity. So all this media has been put there like this gigantic minefield for people to go rummage through. And the process of seeing it all and being able to see more and more, and you learn about, what red means and what blue means and what yellow means and all these things. And, look up what names mean, because that usually tells you stuff. That's all the process of being able to see hidden messaging. Mm-hmm. And these Satanist cult guys have been hiding their communications for eons. And once everybody can see their communications, they can't do that anymore. Yeah. So they can't do what they're doing once everybody becomes enlightened. So this whole process is basically a textbook on how to become enlightened.
It's interesting because there's a part of me that felt as though enlightenment was a very emotional process. This makes me feel like it's a very emotionless process where you almost have to be emotionless in order to be more enlightened.
The more diverse, like people talk about a broad education, right? The more diverse your education is, the more of the symbolism you can see, because you can relate more things like classical literature. If you've read the Bible, you understand a whole lot of biblical stories. And when somebody makes a tacit reference to something that's kind of like the story of Job, for example, you'll understand the reference, where if you've never read that and you don't understand the story, you just say, well, he said these words, but I don't know what the hell it means.
Well, that's the difference consciousness.
Yeah.
Too. Right? Like once something's in your consciousness, you see it everywhere.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, one song that we didn't talk about, Paul, I'm just going to bring it up real quick, just in terms of being able to see things from cross. You guys know the song Paul Simon, You Can Call Me Al?
Love that song.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, that song is about the Divine Comedy written by Dante, right? And You Can Call Me Al refers to Dante Alighieri. Dante Alighieri. And Betty is actually Beatrice, which is a character in there. Anyway, I'm not going to go deep into that, but that's like one of the things is like, wow, this is straight out of Divine Comedy.
Is that a known thing, or is that what you think?
I've seen other people post it.
Like if I looked it up, like it's not something that they said this song is about, right?
No.
I don't know what Paul Simon said it was about. I don't know that he ever said that.
Read the lyrics and see what you think it is. And the thing is, when you do this more and more, you'll see more and more of the same patterns, and they all lean one way.
Yep.
That's what's weird about this is, like, a lot of this stuff is really tenuous, and we're talking about songs that are very, very strong. Like the next one I'm going to do is really strong. But even stuff that we left off the list because, a person who's new to this isn't going to get it. When you start going through this stuff, you can see this everywhere. This is not an accident.
Yeah.
So
you learn to pick it up really fast. This is not like crazy knowledge that you only get if you've spent thousands of hours. I mean, you start to see it. So, we want to go to the next one. The next one, another Devo Peekaboo.
Yeah, Devo Peekaboo, which I will point out as a musician, this is a horrible song. Like I'm surprised that they even recorded this and put it out because it's not fun to listen to. It's not a good song. Why the hell did they write it? But watch it, like get the lyrics, read the lyrics, and then watch the video. And what you're going to see is they're talking. It's the good guys talking directly to the Satanists, particularly Satanists, not like bad guys or criminals. Satanists, and they're saying, "Look what we're doing. We're doing this to you." Ha 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 ha! And it's super obnoxious. And they got these devil characters behind them, and there's red and blue pills orbiting the devil characters. I mean, pills. Every other one is red and every other one is blue, and they're going around. So you have red pill, blue pill in there. And this was put out, I think, in either the late 70s or early 80s. So they had the red pill, blue pill thing back then around Satanists. And when you watch the video, the whole context of the thing is, we're going to knock you out.
That's so obvious.
Yeah, it's in your face obvious. And the song sucks. It is a horrible song. Nobody should ever listen to that song. But there it is.
All right, next song. We had I put it in the list. I don't have it sitting here, but think about Bowie and Freddie Mercury, David Bowie and Freddie Mercury, Under Pressure. I posted something about this in True Social like 3 or 4 months ago. Read the lyrics. That is exactly what we're going through right now, and it is an amazing song for lyrics. Plus, it's a really good song. And Vanilla Ice, he stole that. I don't care what anybody says.
Yeah. I have 2 really quick and potent comments. One is Bowie was the first human being to be publicly offered as a stock.
Really?
Yeah.
How?
He put himself as a human being on the stock market in Britain.
I didn't even know you could do that.
That is absurd, and I smell stink.
Although Bowie is one of those guys where you look at his songs and you're like, I can't tell if he's a good guy writing this stuff or a bad guy, because some of the songs are really dark, like Black Star.
Black Star is so weird.
And the video.
There is no way. There's no way that song and video is an accident. And but we can't tell good, bad. It's so cryptic, but it's obviously talking about this shit. It's just so weird. We can't tell what the hell's going on with it. But the other thing I would point out about Bowie and Mercury is they both died. And I'll bring that up later.
Bowie, Starman. I'm just going to read the one set of lyrics that really sounds like he's good guy talking about the good guys waiting to help us here. There's a starman waiting in the sky. He'd like to come and meet us, but he thinks he'd blow our minds. There's a starman waiting in the sky. He told us not to blow it because he knows it's all worthwhile. That to me sounds like that's military seeing this happening.
Yeah, you know who goes to space? The military. They put satellites up there.
Yep.
So, okay, next one.
Next one is you're on for this, Frank Zappa.
Yeah, Frank Zappa. This isn't there because it's a completely different genre. I mean, Zappa was his own universe of music, but one of his albums, I can't even remember the name of the album, it starts off with a song called Nanook Rubs It, and it's immediately followed by a song called St. Alfonso's Pancake Breakfast. And it's wacky humor. Frank Zappa, you either love it or hate it. But if you go back to Operation High Jump, before Operation High Jump, there was Operation Nanook in Greenland, that was to train soldiers to operate in Arctic conditions. It was followed by Operation High Jump, where one of the things they did was they went and found a German base that there's a lot of BS on the internet about this, big Swaziland or whatever. It turns out that the Germans before World War II wanted to have a neutral territory where they could store a lot of whale oil for making margarine in case they had to feed their soldiers. So it was basically a depot for whale oil. But the lyrics of St. Alphonsus Pancake Breakfast talk about how I stole the margarine. And when you mix that with the name Nanook, and it's all in the Arctic, and it's talking about dog do snow cones and stick it in the fur trapper's eyes, and they talk about don't eat the yellow snow, I think that's basically blinding you with bad information. And so Zappa was the son of a guy who worked in Maryland on probably bioweapons, and also in California, probably, I think, on like plutonium enrichment. So Zappa knew stuff. It's there's the whole Laurel Canyon thing that all seems to revolve around that production studio. Where a lot of that stuff is probably psyops. So, but I'll leave that to you. If you want to look those up and listen to it, read the lyrics and look at it through this lens. And it's really coincidental that it is essentially talking about Operation High Jump and mapping Antarctica and things like that. What's also interesting is I made a post about that, and within 24 hours, General Flynn posted a thing respecting Frank Zappa out of the blue.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah.
What are the odds?
Crazy.
Yeah.
I might post that for people to see here.
General Flynn might have just woken up and thought, you know what? I'm going to post on social media how much I like Frank Zappa today. What are the odds?
I think that's what he did, Paul.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Maybe it was Zappa week.
Okay, so move on to the next. Van Halen.
Van Halen, Mean Streets. You want to take this one?
I would just say read the lyrics. We could go through these. Mean Streets is about all the same themes. The next one I have in line is Dirty Movies. Dirty Movies is about brownstoning. It's about getting people into the whole pornography thing, exploiting everybody involved, getting compromise on people. But the way the lyrics are couched is it's couched as if, oh, this is just cool. But I think not. Read the lyrics for yourself and see what you think.
Use the word couched intentionally.
I did.
Like the casting couch.
See, I didn't even think about that, but that is actually a good connection. So I give you credit for that. Violet, you do the next one, the Take on the World.
Judas Priest, Take on the World. All right. These lyrics, Judas Priest, we're going to do a couple more ones. Those guys are in your face, in the face of the cabal.
Military.
It is so direct. So this is not necessarily the cabal. I think this is just the audience, but got to leave your seat, got to get upon your feet, got to move, going to move you to the rhythm until you can never stop. We got the power, we got the music, and you bet that we can use it. Put yourself in our hands so our voices can be heard, and together we will take on all the world. Move a little nearer. We know you got to follow. You know you got to follow your leaders because we need you like you need us for sure. We're going to drive you. We're going to ride you. We're going to get right inside you. If you want to keep going, just shout for more. Put yourself together in our hands so our voices can be heard, and together we will take on all the world. So I think this is just the military just gone to the public. This is the angel boot going, hey, we're there. We're going to help you. We can see you. So
yeah, this is like Turbo Lover Light, which we'll get to in a second, but go ahead.
Every breath you take, the police. So I remember when this came out, and I remember all the speculation, like, oh, it's this insane stalker.
Are you guys in my brain?
What's that?
By the way, what I was doing while you were speaking was looking up that text message I sent you guys where I was like, this whole album. And I was like, what was the album? And literally it was By the Police. And you literally sent the police as I pulled it up. And I'm like, get out of my head, John.
Yeah, what was the name of that album again?
I'm not in your head. I'm on your computer.
Wait.
Sorry, I'm NSA, Heidi. I'm your handler.
I knew it. The name of the album is Ghosts in the Machine by the Police.
Oh, who would have
Can't make
thought?
this shit up.
No, wait a minute. The album is Synchronicity.
No, but the album I sent to you guys,
Oh yeah, it
called
was Ghost in the Machine.
Ghosts in the Machine,
Yeah.
and I'm like, time out. The
Yeah.
Police had an album called Ghosts in the Machine, and then I like read the lyrics of all the songs, and I'm like, come on.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we're crazy.
Really
So-
crazy.
It's so obvious. It's so like literally, it's so obvious.
All right. So, did you finish with Every Breath You Take?
Yeah, I mean, just read the lyrics. I mean,
Yeah,
it's so clear.
yeah.
This is like,
I'll
look,
be watching you.
we're watching you guys.
John, stop watching me.
That
Got you,
song.
Patty.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So there's two songs from Judas Priest that I'll cover now. One is Electric Eye, and I'll read a little bit of it. Just I gotta find. Okay. In the middle of the song, it says, "I take pride in probing all your secret moves. My tearless retina take pictures that can prove." Okay. Now the whole song is basically a song that looks like it was written about surveillance by satellites. It's an electric eye. And okay, if you were writing a song about surveillance, why would you say it takes pictures that can prove? That's like a police function, right? If you're going to prove somebody's doing something bad. If it was just about pervasive surveillance, it would be like an invasion of privacy theme. But taking pictures that can prove, why? What are they using it for? Crime fighting? And I would say, yeah, that's why that line is in there. And once again, I'm not going to read all these because we're just going to burn up a million hours if we start going through these in too much detail. But read the lyrics and watch the video, because the imagery in the video is often very important because it adds meaning and adds context, like My Chemical Romance. God, My Chemical Romance has some visuals in their videos that are just like, wow. So anyway, that's Electric Eye. The next one is Turbo Lover by Judas Priest. This is one of the most in-your-face, this is the most menacing song I've seen. Turbo Lover is the military telling the bad guys, this is what we've been doing, this is what we are doing, this is what we're going to do. It's going to kill you. And you don't have any choice, and you don't have any defense. I mean, it like, look up the lyrics. It's Turbo Lover. Read the lyrics and then watch the video, and read the lyrics as you're watching the video back and forth. It is just like the military saying they're going to pound them into the dirt. So
Badass.
All right, the next one, Paul, you got to do this one. This is too good. Crazy Train, Ozzy Osbourne.
yeah. Let me.
I feel like I've been on the crazy train for a very long time.
John and Paul conductors.
Yeah, you know, this is in the category of the most popular songs are very often angel poop. So let me just read some lyrics. Crazy, but that's how it goes. Millions of people living as foes. Maybe it's not too late to learn how to love and forget how to hate. Well, that's kind of like what we're learning how to do.
Dude, and this is the guy that bit the head off a bat. And
Yeah.
he's writing about learning how to love and forgetting how to hate.
Okay. Mental wounds not healing. Life's a bitter shame. I'm going off the rails on a crazy train. I'm going to skip a little bit. I've listened to preachers. I've listened to fools. I've watched all the dropouts who make their own rules. One person conditioned to rule and control. The media sells it and you live the role. This is describing how they brainwash people. It's a crazy train. Now, you might just think that Ozzy Osbourne is a philosophical genius. Mental wounds still screaming, driving me insane. I'm going off the rails on a crazy train. I know that things are going wrong for me. You got to listen to my words. Heirs of a Cold War, that's what we've become. Cold War, Russia and U.S. nuclear stuff, right? This goes right back to Eisenhower and all that stuff. Inheriting troubles, I'm mentally numb. Crazy, I just cannot bear. I'm living with something that just isn't fair. So either Ozzy Osbourne is like a really deep thinker, or this is a narrative that is put there so we'll find it now. So, okay, the next one I'll take, John, the Scary Little Green Men.
Yeah.
This is another song that was released in, 2020, I think. So it's very recent by Ozzy Osbourne. It's amazing he can still think enough to do this.
He's still putting out music. I totally missed that.
Yeah, I mean, who would have thought? Let me look this up. This one we just found and said, what? Okay. Their colors are blinding me again. The skyline is bleeding black and red. How long have they been living in my head? How long we bite our tongues and play pretend? It's kind of the same thing, right? They want us, they need us, they might just try to eat us. They'll greet us, deceive us, say, take us to your leader. They're talking about little green men, right? Aliens, right? Or Satanists. Satanists might just want to eat you. Okay? Everybody wants them until we meet them. Everybody wants them. Scary little green men. Do you believe in scary little green men? Men on the moon won't tell us the truth. Is there anyone out there feeding us lies as we look to the skies? Is there anyone out there now? Take me to your leader. We come in peace. I'm human, safe. As if the little green men are saying, no, I'm human, just like you. Almost like the Satanists would say, oh, no, I'm a good person, just like you.
Yeah.
Right? And this whole thing about men on the moon, what is he trying to say? Is there a hidden space program? I think that's where this is going.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I could go through. When you read this whole song, it's just like the other songs. It becomes pretty clear that this stuff was put here for a reason.
I mean, I think we've hit like one or two genres of music. I'm sure there are messages in a lot of other genres of music. So I would ask the audience to start listening, based on what they listen to, see if they find any angel poop there.
Yeah, one of the ones that's a completely different genre, although it's really, really, really tenuous. And so you'd have to see it in the big picture and look at a lot of songs to see that they all lean the same way. But there's a song by Bonnie Tyler called Total Eclipse of the Heart. Everybody's heard it.
Yeah.
But it leans this way. Like, is it angel poop? I don't know. It's too tenuous to really point at and say, that's angel poop. But this stuff is everywhere. It's all over the place. So go ahead and do War Pigs, John.
War Pigs. Well, it's a lot in common with the Bob Dylan Masters of War. It's the same kind of thing, but this is a lot darker, this song. So the first two verses are really just about, okay, these politicians hiding themselves away and all this destruction. Now the last verse, or verse 2, I guess it would be called. Now in darkness, world stops turning, ashes where their bodies burning. No more war pigs have the power. Hand of God has struck the hour. Day of judgment, God is calling. On their knees, the war pigs crawling, begging mercies for their sins. Satan laughing spreads his wings. So the first time I read that through with this lens, I thought, well, why are they talking about Satan laughing? I don't know. And Paul brings up this great point. I didn't see it, but I think Paul's nailed it.
Well, was it the good guys acting like Satan that lured them into doing all these bad things that they're now convicted of?
Either that, or they committed all this evil and they're expecting, to be saved by this guy who directed them to do all this evil.
Yeah, and also Satan as an idea never pays the price for the evil that you commit. You do.
Yep. So
that could also be the meaning.
Black Sabbath is interesting in the sense that they have a couple songs where they're like, I'm Lucifer, take my hand, and stuff that's really, really dark. I tend to think that is more of like sort of an overcompensation, like the white hats talking about Satan and Satanism, whereas real Satanists wouldn't be doing that. They wouldn't be open or overt.
Yeah.
So the next song is Black Sabbath, The Wizard. Okay, I'm going to read this. This is so good. Misty morning, clouds in the sky. Without warning, a wizard walks by, casting his shadow, weaving his spell, long gray cloak, tinkling bell. Never talking, just keeps walking, spreading his magic. Evil power disappears. Demons worry when the wizard is near. He turns tears into joy. Everyone's happy when the wizard walks by. Obviously, there are more beats in there than I was able to put together with reading. The last verse in this, without the chorus: sun is shining, clouds have gone by, all the people give a happy sigh. He has passed by, giving his sign, left all the people feeling so fine. So I think about wizards and warlocks, mentioned a lot by Q. I also just think about, wow, here's a guy who's banishing evil. So I think it's a very hopeful song.
By a band that a lot of people think are satanic.
Yeah.
So, what? Yeah. Doesn't seem to make sense. All right. Next one.
Zombie Stomp. That's you.
Yeah. I'm bringing this up for a very particular reason. This is all about doing the zombies stomp. It's basically a dance, right? It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. But when you read the lyrics and look at it with current events, we've got all these celebrities have died in odd ways, like Prince and Michael Jackson. And recently, you might have noticed that Bob Barker died just before he turned 100, which is funny because he was the host of the show The Price is Right. And the whole object of the show is to guess a price, but not go over that price.
Yeah.
He happened to die right before he was going to go over 100.
Yep.
Does anybody not see the irony in
I
that?
literally thought that when I saw it. I was like, wait.
But yeah, you got to be kidding me. Well, let's see. If you were the PSYOP guys going, what can we do here? Bob Barker, he's about to turn 100. So I have a theory, and I don't know if I'm correct. And everybody says, oh, you shouldn't, date, fag, or predict what's going to happen. Well, okay, I'm going to. So
I'm going to put a date fag warning.
Well, I don't know when this is going to happen, but the next song after this is going to tie into this a little bit because this is out there. I could be completely wrong, but I think too many celebrities have died in strange ways, all the way going back to, say, Elvis forward. I don't know if Elvis is alive or not. I'm looking at the overall pattern. There's way too many of them. Like Prince. Here's a weird thing about Prince. Who else do you know who changed his name to a freaking symbol? How absurd is that? Okay, you're the PSYOPs guys. What can we do? How about he changes his name to a symbol and it happens to be all these gender bending symbols, and now we have the whole training apocalypse thing happen, right? So I think a lot of these, maybe 20, 30, 40, 50 celebrities are going to start appearing from the dead and say, oh, I faked my death. Now, why would I say that? Because if you look at the whole problem, if we go back to Eisenhower and then JFK, who we don't think was assassinated, how would you convince the normies today in 2023 that JFK Jr., for example, and I don't know who it's going to be, but somebody's president, right? That's not Biden, it's not Trump, it's somebody, but it's going to be so unbelievable because that can't happen, right? Well, what if 50 celebrities pop up and say, yeah, we faked my death, and it was all part of this big military operation that was started back, in the early 1900s. And what if they all come back and say that, and they have proof that they were alive, say, a year after they allegedly died, and there's video proof of it, and there's eyewitnesses that are all saying the same thing?
Have you ever seen the ad? There's an ad out there, and I forget what it's for, with a bunch of dead celebrities on an island, like drinking and partying. Have you ever seen that?
No, but it sounds like they're
oh my God, I gotta find it. Like I watched it the other day, and I was like, wait a minute, maybe that's where they're They're all on an island somewhere partying.
That could be predictive neurolinguistic programming, where the PSYOPs guys are getting people's minds opened up to the idea so that they can accept it when it happens more easily.
Yeah.
So they're showing you a scenario that's like ha 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 ha, but then later on when it starts to happen, you don't even know why, but you're more able to understand it or accept it because you saw this commercial, right? That stuff is real. It works, people. But I think they have to prove somehow that this situation is really that screwed up, and how better to do it than with an onslaught of people who died that come back from the dead. Now, this is also internationally. You might know that this guy Prigozhin, who was the head of the Wagners in Russia, his plane just went down a couple days ago. Well, the Russians need their zombies too. Okay, so look up the Ozzy Osbourne song, Zombie Stomp, and ask yourself if the entire zombie narrative, all the genre of zombie movies and all that stuff is simply there to make fun of what's going to happen. Look at Michael Jackson's Thriller and ask yourself why that theme is. Is Michael Jackson going to pop up and say, well, I wasn't really dead?
Love the impression.
So,
that was a terrible Michael Jackson.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I don't think I can even attempt
I
it.
hope Michael Jackson comes back and tells you he's insulted by your impression.
Well, you know, I didn't vote for Biden, so I guess I'm not black.
Either.
Okay, the last song I have on my list is a song called "The Sentinel," and this is another one of those really out there things. But I'm going completely off my spidey sense here. This is another Judas Priest song. Judas Priest is very heavy on their lyrics, with it being the military telling the bad guys, "We are just grabbing a hold of you. We're pulling you us, getting closer. We're emulating bad, and we're just destroying you from within." The Sentinel is a little bit different. It describes, in my opinion, a military action that puts down riots. Some of the lyrics are across his. It's about this Sentinel character that's like basically an emotionless killing machine, almost like the military. And some of the lyrics say, "Across his breast in scabbards rest the rows of throwing knives," which could describe a magazine. And if you've ever seen tacked out operators, they have a bunch of magazines in their vest pouches. And so I think this might be alluding to, if we're about to see another month of riots like we saw in Baltimore, or gosh, we had a year of riots. But if we're about to see another run of riots, I think the way they might end this time is with the military essentially changing it up this time and saying, "Look, you have 30 minutes to disperse, or you will be treated as an enemy combatant. You have no civil rights at that point, and you could be killed." And then they just come in 30 minutes later and just kill them all. I may be wrong. I could be completely wrong. But when I listen to the Sentinel and I look at the context with all the other music that's out there across the whole board, and then specifically the Judas Priest one, that song looks to me like it's predicting an event like that.
I would hope so. I mean, listen, it's not to give people hopium. It's just a theory.
No. I mean, the one thing I would say is, if there's bad shit happening on the streets and you hear an announcement, watch out, because if this song is correct, it's not.
You don't want to be there. Get off the streets.
Yeah, it's not going to be happy.
I have a question though, because if back then, when these songs were being released, the good guys or the white hats or the angels didn't necessarily have full control of the music industry, because we do know there are some bad people in the music industry, and they were speaking to the bad guys, and the bad guys recognized this. Why wouldn't they just shut that band down, or shut down their ability to be able to release music like this?
Well, we don't know how much of the music industry actually was controlled by the good guys. Remember, there's a huge pattern of the good guys acting bad in order to popularize Satanism, so that people weren't afraid of it as much. Because if you go back to the 50s and earlier, try to find references to Satanism. You have like Aleister Crowley, if you go look for it. You've got the Satanic Bible, if you go look for it. You've got Albert Pike in 1871 writing Morals and Dogma, which looks like a good guy emulating bad guys.
So you're saying any artist that was almost obviously satanic would probably have some form of white hat in it, or involved?
Well, yeah, because logically, why would the Satanists put their symbolism out there? We're all told about this karmic retribution, and they have to do this stuff, right? What if all of it's a lie? What if the Satanists would never do that, but the good guys knew that they had to get the message out there that Satanism was a thing? Otherwise, the population wouldn't rise up against it.
So, okay, Marilyn Manson, for example.
Yeah, I was listening to Marilyn Manson the other day. It's full of angel poop.
Great. I get to go back and listen again. Because here, I got to tell you, honestly, as I started to think I was awakening, I stopped listening to music, because I was like, I don't want to get involved with any of this bad stuff. And I used to love Marilyn Manson as a teenager, because I was a rebel, and to me that was just my form of rebellion. But now that I'm looking at it this way, I'm going to go back and listen to it.
Yeah, when you think about it, like Marilyn Manson sings about corruption constantly. I mean, it's a huge theme, right? Let's say you're a corrupt Satanist and you've got all these businesses and you're doing all these corrupt things. Are you going to put out music that tells people how corrupt all these things are? No, you're going to give them soma, or whatever kind of medication dumbs them down, and you're going to put them in school and teach them wrong stuff, and you're going to just paint a rosy picture and convince them that all that stuff is lies. I mean, why would you expose yourself?
But there's the other side of it, where you've got satanic, like these new guys, like I forget the name of the guy who was like a normal singer. Now all of a sudden he's parading around half naked with like satanic stuff all over himself. I don't even listen to new music. I've just seen it. But
Yeah.
that is probably not angel poop or white hat thing, or maybe it is because they're parading him around like a
Right. I mean,
retard,
Yeah.
I mean, there were
like a clown.
compare the music of the 50s to the music of the 60s. In the 60s, there was an onslaught of satanic stuff, just an onslaught. It was like out of nowhere, and I don't think that's an accident. I think that's the good guys promoting it, and the bad guys. I mean, imagine you're in a council of Satanists, really, really powerful people, and you see all this media, and you go,
Who did that?
"What the hell are they doing?" I mean, we got to stop them. But then they go look, and everybody there is corrupt because it's the good guys acting like corrupt people. And they say, "Hey, stop this!" And they say, "Hey, screw you! It's making tons of money." I mean, do you want to make money or not? We're making money, right? So that's the good guys drawing the bad guys in, and then some of the bad guys go, "Yeah, screw this! They're going to go make money." Right? Because the Satanists can't stop their own people from being greedy. And that's the whole strategy, is they sucked the bad guys in with all the 7 deadly sins, got them to be even worse than they would be. And the management of the cabal hierarchy said, "They're taking our people away from us. What the hell?" Right?
Yeah,
and then all of a sudden you can crash the whole system.
It's fascinating. I mean, because again, the whole money making thing with the satanic stuff. I mean, it was proven to be a moneymaker, I think, by the white hats.
Mm-hmm.
And so now these bands are like, their managers like, "Hey, here's what you got to do. You got to put that pentagram on your album cover, and you got to wear the skulls and pretend you like Satan because you got to make a lot of money, son."
Well, and also we don't know how many angels, and by angels I mean rich, powerful people that are good. We don't know how many of those people were promoting it. They were on the boards of directors of all these media companies. Maybe in the early 1900s, they started buying up the media companies so that they were ready for when this was going to spring.
Yeah.
And so you could have, Satanists in the highest positions in the companies, but when a majority of the board says, "We want pentagrams," you don't have a choice. You do it or you're going to get replaced by the board.
Yeah.
So it could have been angels. And so, like I said, there's a big cooperation going on between the angels and the military. The military is essentially being used by the angels as a structure to carry out this angel plan at the most macro level.
I want to be friends with those guys because they sound like fun.
You probably already are.
Guys, thank you. This was a fun episode. Again, you know where to find them. JFAnon Sapioplex on Truth. And Paul, I think you're also Sapioplex on Twitter, but
Yeah.
John, you are JF. Is it -- Anon?
I think it's just JFAnon. I don't know.
No, because it was some chick I was tagging by accident. Said,
shoot, really?
Yeah.
How did she get that? What the hell?
I don't know.
I am JF_Anon.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm going to make a concerted effort to try to write down questions.
Yeah, and if you guys have the time, I know you guys have been spending a lot of time answering questions on Truth. There are a bunch on YouTube and Rumble, so
all right,
have fun with that. Until next time.
Thank you.